Record to this computer. One, two, three. Hey, folks, welcome. This is Jim Cathcart, and this is the Professional Experts Podcast. This is a gathering of people who specialize in doing what they do best as a personal provider of their service, as opposed to a company that would provide it through products or through some kind of a system. The Professional Experts Podcast is for people like coaches and speakers and authors and podcasters and advisors and consultants, people who are basically the product of their business. Years ago, when I was considering this business, I fell in love with the field of personal development. And I went to a big event called the Positive Thinking Rally. This Positive Living magazine was there. And this is a picture of an audience in, I think it was Kansas City, with way over 12,000 people in attendance. And then I went to the one in Tulsa, Oklahoma. This was November 7th of 1976, but who's counting? And there were 11,700 people in attendance. How do I know? Because I was blown away by that number. I was there on the campus of Oral Roberts University in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And the program had all the big names of the day and the new names like Zig Ziglar, who had just emerged as one of the new rock stars of the profession. Well, one of the founders of the National Speakers Association, who was involved with the rallies, was their master of ceremonies and opening keynoter, Don Hutson. Well, Don Hutson was kind of a hero of mine because I'd met him when I was his handler for a local meeting of the American Society for Training and Development in Tulsa. Don came in, blew us away with a great presentation, and he and I hit it off famously and stayed in touch. And Don was on the program with people like Paul Harvey and Cavett Robert and Art Linkletter and Earl Nightingale, Norman Vincent Peale, and other notables of the day. And I got involved with Don's motivation and guidance. And I ended up writing an article for Positive Living magazine a few months later, and ultimately was on stage with the same kind of people. And Don and I have been more like brothers than just friends in this business all those years. Last week in Phoenix, Arizona, the National Speakers Association, which Don is one of the founding members of. When I say founding members, I'm talking like 12 people in a room saying, well, what do you think? And what should we call it? And you got any money on you? Let's pay some dues and get this thing started. So one of the founding members of the National Speakers Association, last week, this 50 plus year old organization held a convention in Phoenix with thousands in attendance. And main stage keynoter for that event was Don Hutson. After all these years, he was back as one of the original founders and an early president of the group, back on the stage delivering a keynote. And today he's with us, certified professional expert number 7, part of my great 8, who were the ones that I wanted to get the CPE to serve as an example for the rest of the world of what one looks like so they'd know what to aspire to. And he's sitting right here in this window next to me, but he's in Memphis, Tennessee. Don, I love you. God bless you. Thank you for joining us. Say hello to the Professional Experts followers.
Well, hello, CPEs, and hello to you, JC. We are like brothers, and we go back so far, and it's all been a fun run, man.
Boy, it certainly has. And we've been in each other's homes and gotten to know each other's families and much more than that, of course. Uh, Don, what I try to do with the Professional Experts podcast is give people an example of yet another career that reached the top 1% and above, um, so that they can see all the different ways to do it. You know, we've had Les Brown on here. I've had Brian Tracy on the program. I've had Eric Swanson, Mr. Fantastic, Mr. Awesome, who was out in California and Utah. And he told his example. Patricia Fripp, so many different versions of doing our business. Now, you graduated, what, Memphis State University, was it?
That's correct.
With a degree in sales, of all
Sales.
things, at a time when nobody had heard hardly of sales. And Dr. Wayland Tonning was the man who was head of your department and kind of guided you through that. And you paid your way through college selling. So clearly, selling is Don Hutson, and Don Hutson is sales. I mean, even your book, The Sale, kind of says the whole thing, doesn't it?
I
Give us
suppose.
a hint, not a hint, an overview of your path, like from the
Wow.
early days, seeing it from the outside, and then being one of the founding rocks on which this whole profession has been built.
Well, Jim, thank you for all of those kudos and for your exaggeration. I greatly appreciate it. I think an interesting story would be to tell you how I got into the business. I was in class, in Dr. Tonning's class, Memphis State University, and as a guest speaker to our sales class, he brought in Dick Gardner, who was promoting a local seminar in town, and he gave a guest talk that was absolutely incredible. And at the end, he offered us a student ticket, half price, to come to his sales rally with four great speakers. Well, for $12 and a half, I couldn't help but sign up. I mean, the value was this big and the price was only this big. So I
But
signed up, and
$12 and a half back then would be what, $120 today or more.
probably, yeah.
Yeah.
So a few weeks later, I went to the big rally down at the auditorium downtown. The second speaker was Dr. Kenneth McFarland,
Oh,
who I credit with getting me into this business.
yeah.
He was known as the Dean of American Speakers. He was if not the most eloquent speaker alive, certainly one of the top three.
Truly an
And
orator.
he was an orator indeed. And he gave a great speech. It was sales oriented, it was patriotic, it was motivational. But I got to tell you, Jim, I got chills. I mean, goosebumps like 6 or 8 times during his speech. I
Wow.
was overcome with his presentation. And at the break, when he was done, I got up and went out to the lobby level and found Dick Gardner, because I'm saying to myself, I don't know what it's going to look like, but this is the business I've got to be in.
Yeah.
So I walked up to Dick Gardner. I said, Mr. Gardner, I'm Don Hutson. I graduate from the University of Memphis in 6 weeks. I want to go to work for you. I can help you sell people on coming to these rallies. This is fantastic. He said, can you go to meet me for breakfast at 7 a.m. tomorrow morning? I said, yes, sir. And I did.
Mhm.
We had breakfast. We talked at length. And by 9:30, he had hired me into this training business.
I love
So
that.
I went to work for a salesman as a salesman for NASE. And initially
NASC,
we went to
NASC, what? National
NAS,
Association of Sales,
NASE, National Association of Sales Education.
Sales Education. You got it.
Yeah. So initially, we'd go into the city for like 3 months, call on all the sales organizations, real estate, stockbrokers, insurance, automotive, you name it. We'd call on all those companies and ask to speak to the sales manager or VP of sales and set up a meeting for one of us to come in and do a 30-minute talk, which was a free sample, a little bit of what we had a lot of coming.
Yeah.
And we did that free of charge, but it was a great experience. And at the end, we would give them a brochure, tell them about the sales rally coming to town, and see if we could sell them on signing up. So
Wow.
my first 1,500 speeches were little 30-minute freebies like that.
Pause for a second.
It was an incredible.
1,500. Now, let me bring some of our younger listeners up to date on this. At that time that Don's talking about, businesses didn't provide training. Almost no business, not even the big corporations, had a training department. They would say, if you called on them, no, we don't do training, we hire well, which was not true, but that's what they believed at the time. The American Society for Training and Development started back in that time frame to grow a lot, but it had been kind of a non-entity for many, many generations. As a matter of fact, there was no such thing as human resources. It was called personnel. And it was not about training people or taking care of them. It was about acquiring people and kind of herding them like cattle to get the most out of them at the time. So here's Don and his crew going to a strange town, staying in a hotel or a motel, getting together with his group in the morning and having a breakfast to get themselves in the right mindset. And then they spread out over town making unannounced calls, what are typically called cold calls. I prefer to call them first calls or new calls. Anyway, they would go in and try to talk to these people they'd never met who weren't expecting them into making time right away for them to do a 30-minute presentation, which resulted in Don getting a handful of payments for tickets to bring people to this enormous motivational event. So back to you, Don. I just want
That's
to
a
bring them.
that's a great overview, JC. More explicitly, I'll give you another example of the sales training situation back in those days in the late '60s. Um, People would you'd say, "Well, tell me about." I'd say, tell me about your company sales training," and they would immediately start describing product training.
Yeah,
Well, there's product training and there's sales skills training, and they are not the same. But
absolutely.
you're right; they didn't have sales training going on, so we were filling that void to a great degree with sales and motivational programs. But as a salesman slash speaker, giving those talks, 30-minute talks to those little groups of 8 or 10 people, man, that was rugged, but it was the greatest training ground in the business. And that's where I really learned how to speak.
Well, that had to make you virtually bulletproof on the confidence level because you'd gone into so many situations, many of which were awful, by surprise. You find out that, the building catches on fire or somebody has a medical emergency or the guy who's introducing you is a smart aleck and he's kind of humiliating you in front of the group and then giving you the moment. Or you're in a room with no microphone, you're in a room with poor lighting. They told you they're going to have a chalkboard for you and they didn't have a chalkboard. And, it just goes on and on and on.
Yeah, all kinds of experiences like that. I may have ultimately felt highly confident and bulletproof, but not at first. I
Hmm.
was incompetent and scared to death. Now, fortunately, Gardner gave me some good sales and speaking training, and that helped me finally get to where I needed to be. But
Yeah.
I worked for Dick a year and a half, almost 2 years, and started my own company doing a similar thing. Uh,
ASTA.
that was Sales Corporation of America,
Oh, SCA. Okay.
SCA, and I had one salesman working for me. He came with me. We started the new company, and we really blew the doors off for about 3 or 4 years. And by that time, I was starting to get invitations to speak at company meetings. And I chose, with Cabot Roberts' help, to get on the speaking circuit.
Hmm.
And the rest is history. So that was a fun run and filled with good opportunities for me. And
Yeah.
fortunately, I seized on them pretty well.
Well, the thing that stands out for me when I look at you and I look at people like Brian Tracy and Patricia Fripp and some of the others that have been in this business for an entire career, when I look back at where we all started, because I had similar roots, we started with bringing nothing to the party except ambition. I mean, seriously, none of us came into it with advanced degrees or having been a leading athlete. Oh, he's the all-American quarterback, or she's the champion this or that. We all came into it with just sweat equity and worked hard. I went to 400 JC's Junior Chamber of Commerce meetings and presented in 2 years in 1974 and 75. And when I started doing that, I was awful at it, embarrassingly bad. But by the time I'd done 200 or 300 of those, man, I'd, bring it on. I was ready, loaded for bear, as we used to say.
Yep.
But all of us did those few first hard years. You spoke in Phoenix in 1979 at the National Speakers Convention on a panel, and I was the MC of the panel. and it was Summers White and you, and I've forgotten who else. Maybe no, I was going to say Mark Victor Hansen, but he was in the front row. Anyway, the two of you for sure were on that panel. And what struck me that day was you pointed out how many speeches you gave without getting paid a cent before you ever started being a paid speaker. And it was
That's right.
hundreds and hundreds of speeches, right?
Yeah, it sure was. And I look back on it. Of course, I was selling tickets to the seminar, so I was indirectly getting paid, but I
Yeah.
did not get a fee check for making that speech. I got paid through the back door.
Do you
But
remember
you bring back,
the first one that was a fee check?
yeah, it was in Omaha, Nebraska, and I wasn't very good, but I sold 3 or 4 tickets, and I thought, you know what? If I can be that bad and sell these tickets, if I get good, I can really sell a lot of tickets.
Hmm.
So I got better. You mentioned that, Jim. Ironically, Mark Victor Hansen called me this morning
No.
yeah, he had heard I hit a home run at NSA and he called to congratulate me. I hadn't
Ouch.
talked to him in 30 years, probably.
My gosh. My Chinese agent, Dr. David Chu, also represents Mark over there. And so through David, I've reconnected with Mark a number of times over the past few years. But what an amazing individual. He
Yeah.
and he and Jack Canfield, his co-author, were at the Book Expo America, the big booksellers convention with thousands and thousands of people from all over the world. And it was in LA that year. And Paula and I were there for my book, Relationship Selling. And here comes Mark Victor Hansen and Jack Canfield. And they said, Jim, Paula, come here. And we sit down and they said, we got a great new book. We hadn't sold it yet, but you ready? Chicken Soup for the Soul. And we thought, and we said, "Yeah, okay, that's clever." And they said, well, no, here's what it is. Anyway, since that time, they've sold what, 100 million books?
Plus, yeah. And they
Wow.
got like they got like 80 something rejections before they ever got it published.
Yeah.
That's a great lesson for people on how to handle rejection.
Isn't
The
it the
answer
truth?
is stick to itiveness.
Yep. And the same's true for so many at the top of the field. I want to skip over a lot of years. We can come back and go through them, but I want to go directly to your experience at the National Speakers Association last week. Now, it's Phoenix, Arizona, which is a place we'd have so many NSA conventions over the years. And you're in a room that looks like it's out of Disney. It's got five huge screens at the front and an audience filled with thousands, and it's elegant and it's the colors and everything is fabulous. And they say, ladies and gentlemen, welcome one of our founding members, past president, member of the Speaker Hall of Fame, CPAE, Continuari Professus Articulatus Excelere, certified speaking professional, Cavett Award winner, Don Hutson. Whoa, whoa. Tell me about that experience.
Well, I got Scott McCain to introduce me, one of the great voices in
Isn't
NSA.
that the truth?
And
Yeah.
boy, he brought me on with great aplomb. How do you screw up after McCain introduces you? But the title of my speech was Back to the Future.
Hmm.
And as you know, Jim, I've spent the last 5 years running a software company,
Yeah.
and I've taken kind of a hiatus from speaking. And the software company's doing well, and we're making sales, making money, and I'm delighted with that. But I'm relaunching back into the speaking business, incidentally. But nevertheless, I gave a 1 hour speech. It was very well received. And if you want me to talk a little bit about content, I'll be happy to.
Yeah, if you would. And by the way, the week before you did that, you delivered a sermon at your church there in Memphis, and I
I
had a
did.
chance to see that online. And it was brilliant, very well done, and very classy, I might add. I think the way you approached that was I don't know, enlightened is the word that comes to mind. But you were well dressed, really conducted yourself like you had done 8 million of these, which is not too far off the mark. Uh, and you were also totally engaged with that audience that day on that subject for that purpose. So clearly, you still got the touch. So,
Thank you, Jim. Actually, I do have a wealth of experience, but that was my first sermon preached from the pulpit of a church in front of a live congregation. So I wasn't nervous, but I wanted to do a good job. And of course, I talked about content with which I was familiar and very excited about. So that makes it easy to do a good job.
yeah,
But the NSA speech was a real thrill. I started off talking a little bit about AI because that's in the forefront of everyone's thinking,
yeah,
and how the experts in AI were saying that by the year 2029, there would be what's called superintelligence in AI, where robots will be smarter than people. At least some robots will be smarter than some people, and uh,
that's a good line.
and and interestingly enough, people were intrigued by that. I talked about the fact that I'd interviewed Dan Burris, and he suggested that there will be a time when we can make speakers a hologram and have super intelligence AI interview, research, and compile the value system and beliefs of, say, George Washington, for example, and create a hologram of George Washington with the likeness of a person that looked much like him and with a voice reproduced like supposedly George Washington's voice was, and have him do a speech. And I suggest to speakers, you better stay sharp, because you might call a meeting planner in a couple of years and ask him to hire you. And he might say, well, this year we're opening with George Washington and we're closing with Babe Ruth. Now, where are you going to fit into that?
Ain't it the truth? And then you
I
look at
told a story too
it's
on the
not,
back.
I was going to say it's not too far fetched uh, because we've seen holographic presentations already. And going back a few years, several years, Nat King Cole's daughter, Natalie Cole, did a performance with him, virtual Nat King Cole on stage and her singing along in a
Yeah,
duet after
that
he
was
passed
brilliant.
away.
That was brilliant.
Yeah.
I also told stories about some of the old legends of NSA. And I talked about Ira Hayes, who I was so fond of. He was like a big brother to us and
Yeah.
Speakers Roundtable.
He was
And
present when I went to my first meeting in Louisville, Kentucky.
yeah, and I mentioned that Ira used to tell the story that when he was a kid, he worked in the 30s in the Depression. He worked in his dad's service station, and people would come in and fill up with gas and then speed off without paying because everybody was so poor. So
Ooh.
Ira's dad trained him. He said, Ira, this is a bottle of Bon-Ami. I want you to take this stuff and get this rag. And every time somebody pulls in, the first thing you do is put the Bon-Ami on the windshield, and it clouds it up where they can't see out. Certainly couldn't safely drive away.
Bonami was a cleaning,
Exactly.
yeah,
So when they pull in,
powder.
he'd say hello, and then he would start wiping the Bon-Ami on the windshield. Then he would say, what can I do for you? And they say, fill it up with regular. So Ira starts filling it up, and you want your oil checked. You know the routine.
Sure.
And then he would get paid for the gas, and then he would wipe off the Bon-Ami off the windshield. But his dad said to Ira, here's the key. Don't ever forget this. Put the Bon-Ami on every windshield. Don't try to prejudge who's going to try to drive away and who's not. Put it on every windshield. I call that the consistency principle.
Yeah.
And I talked about how I extrapolated that into my sales training activities. I said an example of the consistency principle is when you're giving a sales presentation, don't try to prejudge the quality of a prospect or the outcome of a sales call. Give it your best shot every time, because
Hmm.
you never know when you can convert a marginal prospect into someone who might buy because of the greatness of your presentation.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's an example of my back to the future theme. How can we extrapolate an old idea into a useful idea for today?
Hmm.
But I quoted a lot of people at NSA, and I put Sanborn's picture up there after about quoting about a dozen people showing their picture. I put Mark Sanborn's picture up, and I said, actually, Mark never said anything profound, but he's one of my best friends. I promised him I'd mention him today.
That's good. Look at this.
They got a kick out of that.
We got Don Hutson here, Robert Schuler, Norman Vincent Peale, Ira Hayes, who you just mentioned, and then up at the top, Paul Harvey, Cavett Robert, Art Linkletter, and my mentor, Earl Nightingale, to whom you introduced me in
I think I
November
did, didn't
at
I?
that rally in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I, because I knew you, I was able to get down to the edge of the stage and catch your attention. And you said, "Come on back." And I stepped backstage behind this huge platform that was 6 feet off the ground in the center of the arena. And you said, "Have you ever met Earl Nightingale?" And I almost wet my pants. I mean, I was so thrilled. Oh, I listened to his tapes every day. And you said, "Well, come with me." And we went back into the green room, and he's sitting in a chair he's got tissue paper all around his neck, and he's getting made up for his appearance on stage. And he was gracious and said hello to me. And then you and I walked out, and we're looking at this arena from behind the stage. No, this is not behind the curtains, folks. This is on ground level in a great big sports arena. There's a,
Do you remember what I said to you that day?
I'm about to quote it. The stage is this high above us, so you got to climb up to get on the stage, but it's like a wrestling match or a boxing match, raised platform. And Don and I are standing behind that looking out at 11,699 people because I'm number 700. And Don says, "JC, we're next." I said, "What?" He said, "Look at this. And look at all those people you just mentioned." He said, "They are 20 years older than us."
And we were in our 20s.
That's right. We're next. And he absolutely was right. Wow. What a prescient observation and what a
Yeah.
precious moment in my life. Thank you for
Yeah.
that.
One of the things I put on this, to your point about Earl Nightingale, I put a picture of me and Earl, and we're sitting side by side at the head table of some convention.
Mhm.
And I'm looking at him, and he's looking at me. We're very close. And I'm talking, and he's listening. And the first thing I said to the audience, well, first thing is there's something wrong here. Earl should have been talking, and I should have been listening. But I was only 24 years old when that picture was taken.
Wow.
So I was so lucky, Jim, to get such an early start and rub elbows with these great people at an early age. It really impacted my life and set an example for me and helped me create my destiny in my mind before it happened.
Hmm. Years ago, when I was in the JC's, Junior Chamber of Commerce, they had a program called Leadership in Action. And I loved that program because I had never been exposed to that kind of training before. And it was done in a group discussion format. And so I said, "When are we going to have one of those?" And they said, "I don't know. Here, you run it. Here's the manual." So I put together a little group and we had our discussion. And I said, "Loved it. Let's do it again." And they said, "No, you do it again." I ended up doing 200 of those that year for
Wow.
free at nights and weekends. And so I really got into that. And the guy who was state president of the JCs that year was a guy named Ken Kuhn. And Ken said to me one evening before a JC's meeting, he said, "What a great privilege we have to be in this business." I said, "What, JC's?" He said, "No, personal personal development. To be the motivational sources and to be in on this kind of dialogue with other people, to touch lives in such a way that it frees them up and sets them loose to do great things." And I look at you, Don, and that's what we share. We got into the field of helping people make their own lives and other lives better. And in the process, made our own lives the fulfillment of dreams we hadn't even had yet. Think
Yeah.
about all that you've done over the years, not the least of which was that top of the world tour you did where you went to China and everywhere else on a private jet charter with all those highfalutin folks. Man, I mean, you've dined at the table with kings and queens.
Well, I appreciate your overstatement, Jim, as always. I've had a lot of wonderful opportunities. There's no doubt about it. I have been around the world a couple of times, and uh, what a great opportunity and education it's been for me, not just to make my attempt at educating others, but experiencing educational processes for myself.
hmm When I'm doing the speaker summits, not speaker summits, the professional expert summits, one of the structures I use for that summit is a 5 item checklist that I go over with every person who's there. Item one, what is your value message? How do you tell the world what you have that's worth paying to get it? Value message. Okay, number two, what is your brand identity? If a whole bunch of people in your field get together, how do you stand out? What's unique about you? All right. Number three, who is your perfect client? Who is like for me, it's speakers and authors and consultants and coaches, and, like I said earlier. But who is your perfect client so that you can target them and not end up doing business with a bunch of people that take you down a cul-de-sac? And let's see, that's one, two, three. Number four is, what's your business model? Are you a keynote speaker? Are you a trainer? Are you a consultant? Are you a coach? Are you a training materials salesperson? Are you an advisor, mentor? And then finally, what are your standards, your operating standards? What are the solid rock things that you say, this I will always do, and that I will never do? What are the operating standards that guide your systems? Because a system for your business is what a habit is for a person,
Yeah.
and that determines who you become. So, thinking as Don Hutson, value message, brand identity, ideal client, uh, business model, and standards or systems. What does that bring up for you? What can you share with us in the?
Okay, let's go through them one at a time.
Okay.
First of all, the value message, ironically, is I speak on selling value rather than cutting price.
Mm-hmm.
So when I talk about selling value, a couple of high points of that is when selling value, first and foremost, you must understand how that prospect you're talking with defines value. And we only do that through in-depth needs analysis. And
So,
about eight,
pardon the interruption, but the point there that I want to drive home is we don't determine what value is. We're guessing what value is. They determine what is valuable, and we need to hear it and
right,
adapt to it. Yeah.
exactly. And it's our responsibility to learn early on how do they define values? What are their wants and needs?
Yeah.
So we need to get the message out that it's not about me, it's about you
Yeah.
and your wants and your needs. So if you don't mind, I'd like to ask you some questions. So you get permission for needs analysis. You let them know early on that you know it's not about you, it's about them.
Mm-hmm.
People like that. And then you proceed to ask really good needs analysis questions. And you learn how they define value. What do they most want and need and value? Now, what was number two?
Number two was your brand identity. How do you stand out?
Well, my brand identity. I wrote a book entitled Selling Value. I had a really close friend named Jim Cathcart who helped me come up with that title. But you remember that?
There's a blinding flash of the obvious. Yes.
Right. Anyway, that book has done very well, and that's my brand identity. Since that time, however, I've co-authored a book entitled The 1 Minute Entrepreneur with Ken Blanchard, which enabled me to do a good bit of entrepreneur speaking and training.
Mm-hmm.
And I co-authored a book with Dr. George Lucas entitled The 1 Minute Negotiator.
Yeah.
So I also speak on sales negotiations. So those have contributed to my overall brand.
And they do give you a way of standing out among all sales trainers.
Yeah.
Not just speakers, not just self-improvement experts, but even sales trainers specifically. Don Hutson is identifiable in that group. Oh, the guy with the brilliant white shirt and that beautiful tie, that guy, the selling value guy, right?
So while those topics vary a little bit, they're all about business growth.
hmm And then the
But
next one, of course, is your ideal client. How do you
right.
how do you identify that, and how would you suggest others identify who is their ideal client?
Well, my ideal client from the standpoint of marketing to meeting planners is a speakers bureau salesperson or a corporate executive, perhaps VP of sales. Sometimes they delegate picking speakers down a couple of notches, but nevertheless, my ideal client is someone who is looking for someone to address their annual sales meeting or their annual meeting of business owners from the entrepreneurial side
Mhm.
that want to talk about increasing sales by selling value rather than cutting price. And it's a pretty popular space.
Yeah. And the thing that's clear to you is that if they're not a decision maker, that's going to be an introduce me to the decision maker discussion instead of a full presentation trying to convince them and then having to do it all over again when you reach the decision maker, right?
Right.
Yeah.
An interesting takeaway for those who are speakers or consultants who book clients like you and I do. I went to a session at NSA of management company executives who hire speakers, not bureaus, but
Hmm.
management companies, people who manage conventions. I
Ooh.
got some really good takeaways. The moderator said to the four panelists, "What is the one thing that turns you off about speakers?" One of them said, "When they show me their trophies and their big deal titles before I've heard them speak."
Yeah.
Another one turned over a cardboard deal that said leadership expert. She said those words turned me off because there's one standing on every corner.
Yeah.
So we got to be careful how we approach things. They also said we don't want to watch a 15 or 18-minute video demo like we had to do 10 or 15 years ago.
Isn't that
We want
amazing?
we want a 2.5 to 3 minute sizzle reel. No BS. We want to see you speaking.
Wow.
Well, actually, that simplifies.
It
It's
does.
easier to create a sizzle reel than a fancy schmancy video demo like we used to.
Hmm. Well, I remember in the earlier stages of all this, we would send out an audio cassette of an entire speech. And that was, here's what I did last week for the Omaha room manufacturers, right?
Yeah, yeah,
That's what we did. And NSA called it the cassette of the month. And then when I was president of NSA in 1988 and 89, I told Bill Johnson, our exec, I want to change that and I want to turn our audio cassette of the month into a audio magazine. And so we started doing shorter clips. And then videos demos came about. And then, it's morphed into show me, give me 13 seconds of your best stuff in front of an audience of 12,605 people.
yeah,
Whoa, that's a little too surgically specific. But
yeah. It
that's where
really
the
is.
market's going.
It is.
Yeah. So what about business model? Your business, you've got a multiple business model enterprise now because U.S. learning and then the software business that you're in and the other things you've got going on. Don Hutson's more than a speaker.
Well, it's interesting you mention that because at Speakers Roundtable this year in Utah at Chad Hymas's ranch, I put it on the table that I'm breaking back into the business. Would appreciate anybody's input on how to do so. And they said the fact that you've been gone 5 years from speaking, you need to turn that into an advantage because you co-founded and have been building a software company. Not many speakers can say that, especially in this era of AI. And anyway, that's what I'm capitalizing on. And one of our members, Phil Jones,
Yeah.
actually wrote me a new bio. There's no way I could have done it as well as he did. I'll send you a copy
Good. I'd love to see it.
and look it over and see what you think. See if you have any critique before I put it out to the marketplace.
Good. Thank
But
you.
but anyway, that's going to be my approach of my means of diving back into the marketplace.
Yeah, and I think it makes good sense. Our friend Tony Alessandra, who's also a CPE, Tony years ago, he and I and you were all three professional speakers, and that was our main lane on the highway. And then we went different directions. I bought a psychological research firm over in Arizona and ended up doing the work that became the book, The Acorn Principle. And that was a lot of psychological research and assessment and testing and such. Tony took the DISC model of personality types, social styles, as you and I have taught it, and and became one of the world's leading providers of online assessment reports. And he's the back end for Brian Tracy and Tony Robbins and Grant Cardone and Dale Carnegie and a number of others. So he's got
Yeah.
a thriving multi-million-dollar business with people in remote locations all over the country doing things for people like us. And he says, I'm not that interested in speaking anymore.
Yeah.
So he spends most of his time sitting at his computer monitor and counting his money intelligently before he makes the next choice.
Yep. That's right.
So, how would you advise the people that are already experts at the at least early levels in their field, if they're going to build a business around who they are and what they're able to do, just run with that stream of consciousness for a minute. Advise them.
First thing I would say, Jim, is I would offer this advice in one sentence. Listen to your marketplace. Listen to what you are learning from others who are out there. Listen to your clients and your prospects telling you what they want and need. And as we listen, we're going to hear varying messages from what we heard a year or 18 months ago.
Yeah.
And we've got to listen to our marketplace, learn from that, and pivot and adjust accordingly.
Yeah. And not listen just until you hear confirmation that they need what you have.
Right.
That's what a lot of people do. Yeah. Well, Don, tell me a little bit. Yeah. Well, okay, not about that, but tell me a little bit. No, not about that either. Tell me about. Oh, now we're talking because I can do that.
Yeah.
No,
Right.
that's not selling, and that's not listening. That's winnowing things to get to where you insert yourself as a persuader once again, which is the
That's
quickest way
right.
to turn off a customer. Yeah.
Yeah. Dale Carnegie used to say the greatest thing in the world to sell yourself to somebody is to talk with them about them, not about you.
Yeah. Sweetest sound in the world to them is
Their name.
their own name. That's right. Well, there's a quote from Don Hutson that always echoes in my psyche and always will. And I love this quote. And you always open it up with me by saying, JC, I've found, and then whatever comes after that, I know is going to be pure gold. And you said to me, JC, I've found that there are very few problems in the world that can't be solved with more sales.
That's right.
That, my friends, is a piece of pure gold from Don Hutson. Ain't it the truth? But it's not selling in the way that we used to think about selling. Me talking you into buying. It's helping
Yeah.
people for pay.
That's right. And let's remember that there's nobody who doesn't periodically have a bad day.
Yeah.
But our challenge is we got to stay up anyway. I love to say, here's another gem for you, JC. If
Okay.
you're having a particularly bad day, remember, with your genuine efforts and the help of the Lord, you can handle anything one day at a time. And if it's a particularly bad day, with the help of the Lord, you can handle anything an hour at a time. And if it's a really, really, really bad hour, with your own ingenuity and the help of the Lord, you can handle anything 1 minute at a time.
And you can only live 1 minute at a time anyway.
That's right.
Beautiful. That's some wisdom right there. I love that. Well, how can you see the certified professional expert designation being more valuable in the marketplace? And let me preface your answer with some more information. There are 30 currently who hold the designation certified professional expert. And there are people like Don and like Dennis Waitley and Les Brown and Patricia Fripp and all these folks that we've mentioned so far. And there are newer recipients of it, people that have been in the business just a few years. and they're veterans like us that have been around this business for a long time. But the point of it all is not that I teach you to be an expert. I assume you're already an expert. If you're an expert in window replacement and you're not making your money selling windows, but rather selling your expertise so that you're the thing that I'm paying to hear from and learn from, I'm not going to teach you to be a window replacement expert. I'm going to teach you to be a professional window replacement expert. If you're a speaker, I can teach you to be a better speaker because I've traveled that path. But CPE is about being professional in whatever it is that you specialize. That means there are 5 qualifiers for a professional. They're well educated for what they do. Doesn't have to be formal, but it's well educated for what they do. So they got a lot of experience, a lot of depth and knowledge, right? They never stop learning, constantly renewing. They do what they do for pay. They do it as a service to other people and according to a set of ethical standards. That's a professional. So Don, that's what I'm trying to promote is the popularization of professionalism by teaching people how to be more professional and to show their professionalism to inspire others still. Thoughts on that?
Jim, the first thing that pops into my mind is from a competitive standpoint, we've got to work on being on the cutting edge and not on the following edge of our space that we've chosen.
Mm-hmm.
So I love what you're saying about you got to keep on learning, not only the basic and advanced skills, but also the skills of dealing with people and exceeding their expectations and having a good customer service model and things of that nature. That's the only way we're going to stay on the cutting edge is we got to keep on getting better and better and better.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so easy not to when we're busy doing what we've been doing for 20 years.
It's really easy to swim downstream.
It really is. But the upstream swim is about learning and demanding more of yourself. So I applaud what you're doing. I'm proud to be a CPE
Thank you.
and delighted to try to help you advance this great designation any way I can.
Thank you. Well, years ago, when the National Speakers Association decided to certify their people, that before the certified speaking professional, it was Continuare Professus Articulatus Excelere, the Council of Peers Award for Excellence. That it's CPAE, which is that ring that you've got on your finger, right? Is that
Right.
your Speaker Hall of Fame ring?
It is.
And what they did was the first thing they did was they established standards by which they would measure the speakers that were considered to be in the Speaker Hall of Fame. And the second thing they did was to go to a group of well-established, highly visible people and gain their involvement and designate those people as the first crop, so to speak, the first inductees into the Speaker Hall of Fame before it was even called the Speaker Hall of Fame. And that was done in Louisville, Kentucky at the National Speakers Convention at the Galt House Hotel, where I've told people this in this podcast before. I couldn't afford the $40 for the lunch where you and the others were in that room with Zig Ziglar as the keynoter and you were given the CPAE designations to the people in the room. So I stood in the hallway and ate a hot dog from a street vendor and hoped that the door would close slowly between people coming and going so that I could hear more of the speech and the things that were going on. So while you were sitting comfortably in that room with your friends, I was outside going, trying to get in the door.
I've never heard that story.
That's the God's honest truth. Wow.
That was the first year. I tried for 5 years to talk Dr. Kenneth McFarland into being a member of NSA. And I finally felt like I was bugging him a little bit, but he knew that he was my mentor. And he listened to me and he knew I was kind of rising in the chairs of NSA.
Yep.
I finally said to him, Dr. Mack, I know you don't need NSA, but NSA needs you, and I think you should join. And he said, if you feel that strongly about it, I'll join. And he joined in the very first year we had him keynote the NSA meeting in Louisville.
That's right. And I helped arrange the chairs in that room with then president of NSA, Ira Hayes. We were stacking chairs and moving tables and putting the tabletop lectern in place for Dr. McFarland to have his microphone exactly where he wanted it to be. And he came into the room, and I got a few moments, standing near my hero. And after that convention, when I was flying home, I was on the same flight with him, and we were in the gate area together, and I had a chance to chat with him. When we got to Chicago, he put my luggage on his trolley and pushed my luggage through the airport to our next gate. What a
Wow.
thrill for a young guy like me.
Yeah,
So thank you for
that's
talking him
terrific.
into being there.
I got to say one more thing about Dr. Mack. He spoke until he was 85, the year that he died.
Wow.
And we had stayed in touch. And on a Saturday, he had gotten home from his last trip and he was unpacking and he was standing in his closet arranging his clothes and he fell over with a heart attack. That was on a Saturday. On Tuesday, I received a letter from him.
Whoa.
That blew my mind, which he had apparently dictated to Hazel, his assistant, the previous Tuesday or Wednesday, and she typed it and mailed it. But I can't tell you how that made me feel.
Wow.
But what a great mentor. I got his picture right over here. He's
Wow.
amazing,
Yep.
absolutely amazing.
Folks, look him up. Dr. Kenneth McFarland, the Dean of Professional Speakers. Man, he at one time had statistically, he had spoken to so many people in person from the stage that he had statistically addressed face to face one in every seven people in the entire United States.
Isn't that
Now
amazing?
that's market dominance.
Jim, if you like, I'll send you a link to the little 12-minute talk I did at NSA 2 years ago, where I tell the goosebump story with a
Oh,
little more detail. If you want to
please,
forward it to your members, I'll be glad to send that to you.
happily do that. I'll post it on the CPE site when I post the recording from today's visit. Well,
Excellent.
Don, you've been awesome, and this is kind of like hanging out with my own immediate family. When I'm with you, I literally feel like I'm just as close to you as I am or was to my sister who's passed away or was to any of the best friends I had growing up. You're a special guy in my life, and I love being able to share you with the people I know.
Thank you, Jim. Hurry up and come to Memphis. We'll go eat some more barbecue.
Oh, yeah. All righty. Thank you.
Great privilege being with you.
You too, Don. Thank you. Take care.
You bet. Bye.